In the last episode, we were at the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., where we saw one-of-a-kind items from the Apollo 11 mission, all kinds of interesting artifacts from the Soviet space program, and to top it all off, the actual spacesuit of Neil Armstrong. This week, we are still in the Air and Space Museum and looking at a little bit of the history of flight and the connection that the Wright brothers have with the moon landing. So really, in the world of aviation, this is considered one of the pioneers, Charles Lindbergh, who made the first non-stop solo transatlantic flight from New York to Paris in 1927 in the Spirit of St. Louis. And right there it is, Charles Lindbergh's plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. That is pretty awesome. Gosh, that is crazy that he went across the Atlantic Ocean in that thing. I can't even imagine. Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. This is some survival equipment that Lindbergh carried with him on his flight. Got some fishing line and hooks and matches, hacksaw blade. Also, this is something called a barograph, which would give record of the altitude and flight duration. Kind of interesting. And then the original nose cone was replaced on the Spirit of St. Louis. Well, here's the original, which is signed by the crew that worked on the plane. And that symbol right there might be a little uncomfortable to us now. At the time, it was a Native American good luck symbol before Hitler took it and just ruined it. So after his famous flight in 1927, Lindbergh was probably the most famous man in the world, and these are just some little buttons and Lindbergh memorabilia. Here's something that's not widely known. I didn't know it anyway. After his 1927 flight, Lindbergh made another famous flight in this plane right here. Oops. And literally flew around the world in it with his wife. Also crazy. Not that he went with his wife, but he flew around the world in this plane. And then here's the route right here. Said he described it more as a vacation. Just the endless public attention and scrutiny from his 1927 flight. He was needing a break, so he flew around the world. I've got a feeling that I know what we're getting ready to see in here. So originally the Wright brothers were in the bicycle business, and this is one of their bicycles. And they took what they learned about bike building and applied it to aviation and building an airplane. A lot of similarities. You have to have balance and control. It has to be lightweight. You have the chain and sprocket system for propulsion. Interesting. There are many reproductions, but only one original, and this is it. This is the original 1903 Wright Flyer. Went 852 feet in 59 seconds as a result of some good old American ingenuity, and that is where our history of flight, at least with planes, began. Now we fly over the world and don't even think anything of it, but it all started right here with this plane. Pretty amazing. And the seating does not look especially comfortable. Here's the original propeller from the Wright Flyer. Looks a little busted up. And also, I'll get that glare out of the way. Here's a stopwatch that was used to time the Kitty Hawk flights. And then this is Orville's pocket watch that he had while making the first flight. Very cool. So we already saw this in the space video that I did, but it's kind of interesting. They went in the display here from the Wright Flyer, the very beginnings of space flight, to lots of people here, to Neil Armstrong's spacesuit. So you go from the beginning to the extreme limit of human air travel and space travel. Most people are just breezing right by this, but this is so incredibly interesting to kind of symbolically link the first airplane flight with the first human exploration of the moon. This sample of wood and fabric from the original Wright Flyer was carried to the surface of the moon by the crew of Apollo 11 in 1969. That is really neat. Well, I have to say, that museum surpassed my expectations. That was really, really cool. The connection that they made between the Wright Brothers and the first manned mission to the moon was really what stood out to me the most. It's crazy to think that we went from having the very first airplane in 1903 to just, 66 years later, putting a man on the moon. Very cool. Well, that was the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. Very, very interesting place. Listen, I don't know what the heck that thing is, but it looks broke.